The Judicial Service Commission has a massive task beginning on Monday. 88 candidates are scheduled to be interviewed over 2 weeks to fill 31 vacancies at judicial institutions such as the Constitutional Court, Supreme Court of Appeal, the Labour Court and all of the divisions of the High Court. However, the appointment of justices to 2 Constitutional Court vacancies is of prime concern, particularly in light of the increasing critical scrutiny with which the present court has been subjected to. To speak to us about the criteria for the appointment and interview process, I'm joined by Alison Tilley from Democratic Governance and Rights Unit. Alison, a very good morning. Thank you for speaking to us. 31 judges, quite a task.
Well, we have to remember that the JSC hearings last year were cancelled. Normally there's a hearing in April and another hearing in October, and both of those interviews were postponed. There's another hearing now, April, so I guess it's doing 3 sessions in one. So there's a lot of candidates in a lot of different courts.
I think a little bit over 31 candidates it is. Tell us a little bit about the panel that will decide on who goes forward or who's appointed.
Well, the JSC is a very interesting body. It's made up of lawyers, as you would expect, judges and politicians. And the way that the JSC sits, when you're looking at them, you'll see your Chief Justice sitting at the head. You'll see the Minister of Justice also there. There's also somebody who represents the judge's president. And then there are attorneys representing different attorneys associations, advocates. There are 4 people on the panel who are there through being appointed by the president. And there'll be new candidates this year. So it's a broad group. It's big. It's 23 people. There's an argument that it may be too big to really do the job that it has to do. And they will begin sitting on Monday, and they will be up and running for 2 weeks.
Now, what is it that they're looking for from these candidates?
Well, that's a very good question. It's one of those things where you would like there to be an easy answer, and you refer to a section in the Constitution. But what that does is the Constitution really only gives you a very sort of broad outline. So you have to be fit and proper. In terms of transformation criteria, that's also something that the JSC needs to look at. But when you start to get into details about exactly what people should and shouldn't know and what experience they should and shouldn't have had, there's often, there is nothing formal, there is nothing that's written down that they refer to when they're interviewing. And in fact, we've seen, I think it was in the last round, we've had people on the JSC literally asking a question of a candidate and then saying to the other members of the JSC, I know you may not agree with me that this is a good question to ask. So it's a bit worrying. We would be a lot happier to see articulated criteria which are then referred to in the interviews, and a more of an agreement on what the interview should do. Interestingly, the Magistrates Commission do their interviews quite differently, and they have quite set questions. They have criteria that they're looking at, and it's more you have a sense of what the candidate should have and shouldn't have.
Does the JSC have a transformative agenda? Are women catered to? For instance, and there are a little bit over 80 candidates that will be interviewed. Can we tell from the number of candidates that are being interviewed?
I think we've done, certainly in terms of transformation in the judiciary. It's one of those questions, is transformation as a project ever really complete? But what we certainly do know is that of the people who are now judges, that they've all been appointed since 1994, and there's been a very strong emphasis on applying the transformation criteria. This round, I think, equally so. There's really a very broad range of candidates, and I think particularly for the senior positions in the Concourt and the SCA, a lot of candidates, which doesn't sound like, that should be unusual, but it actually has been very difficult to get candidates to come forward for the Constitutional Court and the SCA. So that's very good to see.
Difficult to find. That's interesting that you should say that. Why, though? Is it because there are not enough people qualified? Is it because people are not interested in working for the judiciary?
Well, there just does seem to have been a reluctance to come forward. Remember, for the Constitutional Court, you're looking for people who've, they're experienced senior judges. They've had experience acting in the Constitutional Court. There just doesn't seem to have been an appetite amongst very senior, eminent lawyers, for whatever reason, to come forward. But this round, I think, is very different. We've seen a lot of candidates, and they're very good candidates. So I think that's very encouraging. Of course, we have to be aware with the Constitutional Court that there are 3 justices who will be stepping down in this year, including the Chief Justice. So although we're trying to get 2 appointed now, there's still another 3 to go for this year. So we're probably, we would be saying that, what about a round of appointments in July, because the JSC has done that before. So where we can try and catch up with the backlog in terms of these appointments.
Alison, Justice Hlophe making the headlines yet again, and he's been found guilty of gross misconduct.
He has indeed. We got the order last night, and I've just been looking at the provisions for removal of judges. You can only remove a judge if the JSC finds that the judge suffers from an incapacity, is grossly incompetent, or is guilty of gross misconduct. So, of course, that's the third one. The president can suspend a judge who is the subject of a process for removal in terms of gross misconduct. So that might be one of the first consequences that we would expect to see, is a suspension of Judge Hlophe. And then after that, assuming that the JSC agrees with the panel, it will then go on to Parliament. Parliament hasn't done this before, and I'm not sure that they have the procedures to do it. So just like with removing the public protector, they have to start by figuring out what the rules are before you actually get into the substance of whoever the particular person is. They're probably going to have to start thinking about that quickly. So, that's certainly going to start a lot of different wheels in motion.
Final question is, when this report goes to the JSC, who is sitting with the Chief Justice going through that report? Does he do it on his own? Is it another panel?
You mean in relation to the decision on the Hlophe matter?
Correct.
So that will go to the JSC. It goes to a sort of subcommittee of the JSC that the politicians don't sit on. So you'll recall with Judge Matata, that group, that part of the JSC sat and handed down a decision where they said it was not something that was impeachable conduct, and instead they ordered him to pay a fine. It seems unlikely in this instance that would be an option, given the just what's set out in the findings. So we would expect that to happen soon. the thing is that obviously the JSC is so busy these next 2 weeks with all of these other issues. You know, the question is, when will they get to deal with Judge Shelpe? But that's something that I think, in terms of the credibility of the accountability systems and the judiciary, it really is really, really important that that's dealt with soon.
Alison, thank you for your time this morning. Alison Tilley from Democratic Governance and Rights Unit speaking to us this morning.